Module 6, we are going to go through Project 5, the Cupcake Bakery CSS site in the Against the Clock book. And in this module, we are going to add an HTML form to a site, and we are going to use the class selector. So in the previous module, we looked at ID selectors, and now we will be using class selectors. And the advantage of that is that a class selector can change the appearance of multiple elements on a page. For example, if you have an H2 ID selector element, you can add a specific class selector property to that element, but it would not affect other H2 elements on the page. So that can be an advantage and a disadvantage because you can be very specific with your tasks. Read more carefully on page 217, the beginning of this project in your textbook, and then download your Cupcake files from Against the Clock, and then set up a site in your local root folder called Cupcakes. I've set up my Cupcake site here, and there is a template folder with a design template inside, which I have open on my screen. As you can see, there is one page content editable area in this template. We're going to be adding a background image to the header area. We're going to format content on individual pages in this site. And then we're going to add the form. In Design View, we're going to open the CSS Designer panel and select All. Select your style sheet in Sources, and then click the Add Selector button and type in a period for class selector and background BKG home and press enter. Uncheck the Show Set to assign some properties. And define the following for this selector. We're going to give it a background image, which we're going to select in our Images folder under Backgrounds. Select the Back Home PNG, and then No Background Repeat. If your Background Home class selector is not at the bottom of your selectors, go ahead and move it to the bottom. Now we're going to click to place our cursor in the header area. And in our tag selector, click on header, select that entire element. In our properties panel here, now we can select our option class that we created here, the background home. And now we can see the image in that element. Place your cursor back into the header, save the file, and go ahead and update all your files. Now we can click on the CSS file and look at the related code in our header area. We can see because we moved the selector to the bottom, scroll all the way to the bottom, and if you select the URL, you can see the image pop up to show you what the image looks like. Now we want to edit some CSS code. We're going to click on our source code. In our CSS code, we are now going to copy the last lines with that class background home selector highlighted, which starts on line 116, and go ahead and copy this entire code, these 4 lines of code, and I'm going to select Command C for copy. Then I'm going to click on line 120 after the curly bracket and do a Command V to paste it. So I'm just duplicating this code. Instead of retyping it all, I just copied and pasted it to make it easier to write the code for the next class selector. In line 121, I'm going to change the URL here because I want to change this image, and I'm going to change the name from home. I'm going to delete home and type over every day to create another class selector. Then I'm going to delete the code for this URL. And I'm just going to type a U after background image colon, and Dreamweaver shows me the code hints here that I can select URL. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and hit return. And then it shows me that I have some options here of where I can go get my URL, and I'm going to select the browse option. And in my backgrounds folder within the images folder here, I can select the image background everyday PNG. Now I want to do the same thing, curly bracket, and now I'm going to replace home with the word weekly. I'm going to delete this URL, type in U, select URL, select browse, and select the back weekly PNG. To save time, go ahead and add the class selectors for background custom and background join. So add the BKG custom and use the browse button to select the back custom PNG image, and then add the BKG join selector and select the back join PNG image. Okay, so if I open up my CSS Designer panel, I can see that after the background home class, I now have the everyday, weekly, custom, and join classes. And in my CSS code, I can see the code here with the attached URLs. I'm going to click on the header tag in the tag selector to select that element, and then choose Tools, Templates, Make Attribute Editable. So what I want to do here is define an editable attribute in this template so that I can change only that attribute on the page. I want to select the class attribute. I want to make the attribute editable with the label class and the type text and the background home. And click on OK. And now the image goes away because when you make an attribute editable in a template, the previously defined value is removed from the page code. So in the design view, the image is no longer viewable. We can save the template file and update all the links. In my Files panel, I want to open the Cupcakes Everyday HTML page, and then my CSS Designer panel, select the style sheet, and now I want to go to Edit, Template Properties, and I want to type in under Class Background Home or BKG Home to select that class, and then click on OK, and now I can see the image. And now we can do the same thing for other HTML pages. So we want to be able to show the image in our header area and leave everything else in that header element uneditable so that we cannot change that. Go ahead and open Cupcakes Weekly, Cupcakes, Custom Cakes, and join the club and make the change for the class BKG Weekly, Custom, and Join for each page in the site. I have my Cupcakes Everyday page open in live view. And you can scroll down to look at the page. So there's a list of cupcakes with names and image and a description of the cupcake. But you'll notice that the sizes of the images are different, so we want to make that consistent. And we're also going to apply a clear property, and that's to define whether floating content can wrap around the image or not. So if we want these descriptions to wrap around the image, then we want to create a clear property. We're going to add a new selector in our CSS Designer. going to call this, it's a class selector, I'm going to call it IMG 150 pixel. And we're going to define the following properties. Under layout, I'm going to give it a width of 150 pixels, a height of 150, left and right margin of 5 pixels, bottom margin of 10, and a float of left. Now you can see I've got show set checked. You can see the new class selector with the properties 150 width and height and the margins, and then a float to the left. Now I want to select my top cupcake image, and I can apply on my properties panel. I'm going to move that up here. I can apply the class that I just created, and I want to do that with all my cupcake images. You can also type in manually 150 to make the image size consistent. So go ahead and go through and make that change so that all the cupcake images are set to 150 pixels across as well as the height. Now that we've resized all these images, and typically it's better to go ahead and resize those in Photoshop so that you can get everything at the size that you want in Photoshop to optimize the speed of your site instead of having to resize everything in Dreamweaver, because otherwise when you upload your files it's going to upload all the original sizes. So it's always better to get in the habit of go ahead and resizing them to the actual size that you want them to appear in your site in Photoshop before you bring them into Dreamweaver. So let's go ahead and do our next step. We're going to select the confetti text frame that's given an H2 element and click on Edit Rule in your Properties panel and select Box. And we're going to choose the Clear Both option. Click on OK. Then we're going to switch back to the HTML section in the Properties panel to return to regular mode. In Design View, you can see the descriptions to the right of the images. I'm going to switch back to Live View and click on the CSS code and scroll to the end of the code. From the first empty line at the end of the code, I'm going to type in a class selector IMG float right space followed by the curly Q bracket, and then I want to type in FLO and select the float property, select right, and type a semicolon at the end of the line. Now I want to select the image under confetti and click the Add Class option in the element display. I'm going to type in .I to add another class selector, MG float right, and I have that option here since I typed it into the code, so go ahead and select it to apply that class. Now I can click on source code and scroll down to see the code for that image. So the SRC code is telling me where the image name and where it's located in the images folder. And then there's alt text, the width and the height, and the class. Now there is the IMG 150px class followed by the IMG float right class. So there's two classes that can be applied to this one element. Go ahead and apply this second class to all the other remaining images. Now I can close this. After saving all, I can close the Cupcakes Weekly HTML page. And in my Files panel, I want to open the Weekly Update HTML page. Switching over to Live View, I'm going to select the image under Adam's apple, and in the display element, I'm going to click on the plus sign to add a selector. I'm going to type in dot for the class selector IMG 150px. Return. And in this case, I'm just going to hit escape. I'm not going to select a source. I don't want to override that property in the selector in my CSS file. So I'm just going to add this class to this particular image on this page. Now I can do the same thing for the remaining images. So I've added that class selector to all the rest of my images. I'm just going to do a regular save to save this HTML page. And next in the textbook, you can follow the steps to insert an HTML page into another, but we're going to skip that in this video tutorial, and it's not something I will require of you in your final projects. But just be aware that if you want to do that, that's called an iframe element, when you want to load one HTML file inside another. So when the browser calls the page, the web server reads the link and includes the linked file as part of the parent page. We're going to go ahead and skip that and move on to stage 2 in the next video.